Justin Baldoni was sued in 2021 for racial discrimination and retaliation. So it turns out Blake Lively's lawsuit isn't the first, it's actually the fourth. I'm not sure why the media is not talking about this when it's talking about everything when it has to do with Blake Lively, but one of my users who runs a Reddit channel actually sent me this information. She sent me the lawsuit and I've been going through it for the last few days. Then another follower I have sent me this article, which was put on the Oh No You Didn't live journal page discussing this whole lawsuit. So according to the lawsuit in 2021, Justin Baldoni and Steve Sarowitz, who's the money behind Wayfair, were sued by a terminated managing editor of their podcast, Man Enough. So in 2021, before Wayfair was formed, the man claims that he was hired by a different company, which was Justin Baldoni's, and it was called WEL. He says he was hired for 2 years with the promise that at the end of the 2 years, he could have an equity share. Now, what he didn't know at the time was that Justin Baldoni and Steve Sarowitz were already planning on creating Wayfair, and so they were going to move the company from WEL into Wayfair, which in fact would sever his contract. So he claims that they lured him from his previous job, saying that this was going to be a permanent position when in fact they knew it wasn't. Now, he's also suing for racial discrimination because he claims in 2019, when he was interviewing for this position, now he's a black man, he says that Steve Sarowitz said to him, "We need somebody here that looks like you." He says in 2020, after the murder of George Floyd, that racial tension started to spike throughout the company. And he says over the next several days, plaintiffs made several complaints to Mr. Proctor about the CFO, Brian Singler, being tone deaf in meetings about the racial tensions. He says that he was previously told by them that they were well aware of how white WEL was. And he says that after the death of George Floyd, he started to be treated differently and he felt that his whole team was. And he says that he was being looked at as the angry black man. He says that another staff member who happens to be a white female took a screenshot of his private Instagram account and a post that he had made about racial bias, and then took it apparently to the CFO of Wayfair, who is Brian Singler, and said that he was basically accusing him of being racist. He said it had nothing to do with the CFO and it was just about the broader social commentary. And he said when he confronted this white female, she filed an HR complaint against him for bullying. A month later, he spoke up about what he claims was inappropriate handling of a black queer guest on the podcast. And he says all during this time that Wayfair and Justin Baldoni were assuring him that this job was permanent and safe. In September of 2020, he was fired, and then they tried to rehire him as a consultant at a much bigger pay cut. And he says that when he was let go, even though his 2-year contract was not expired yet, they offered him a much smaller severance package than they offered all the other non-black employees who were let go. The next month, he filed a racial discrimination complaint and claims that they asked him for all of his equipment back, even though he was technically still working for them. They also stripped him of his producer credit, and the very next month, they fired him for what they said was performance issues. He ended up suing them for racial discrimination and also for retaliation because he had spoken up. So this is now the fourth lawsuit against him. So we know Blake Lively's, we know Stephanie Jones, who is his former PR company, and now we have this one, as well as the terminally ill young man who was accusing him of stealing the script for 5 Feet Apart. Now, I was also sent this article. This is from September 27th of just this year. It says former NBA star Craig Hodges locked in fight with Justin Baldoni's Wayfair over documentary rights. So Craig won 2 championships with the Chicago Bulls, and he had struck a deal with Wayfair, the production company run by Justin Baldoni and billionaire Steve Sarowitz, of course, to turn his 2017 book into a documentary. They got to a point where they just couldn't agree on how they were putting this together. He wants the rights back to his book, and apparently Justin Baldoni and Wayfair want money for it. So now they're fighting this out. Whether it's going to turn into another lawsuit or not, who knows?